Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome on this sunny but slightly wet Monday for most of us. Thank you for joining us today. We've got quite a packed hour and a bit for you, so I'm hoping you're all going to get something out of it. A couple of things, first of all, to tell you before I introduce my guest for the day. There is the latest update from Hmrc on furloughing is now up on the website. It was amended slightly on, I think, Friday. I know some of you may well have caught it over the weekend, but that is now up on the website. There is a link through. It's very comprehensive. I think it answers a lot of the questions that you have all been asking over the last couple of weeks. But if not, I'm sure you'll find space to ask those today. A big number again today, which is great. It's lovely to have so many of you with us. And just to let you know that tomorrow, Tuesday, we've got Claire Warner here as my special guest. Claire is our guru as far as the payroll syllabus and examinations are concerned. So if you've taken your exams recently on payroll or you're thinking about doing it, she's heavily involved with that. And of course, being in payroll, she's going to hopefully know lots of things about furloughing and paying people and everything else. So that should be a good one. On Wednesday then, as I've said previously, we've got Nick Good coming along. Now, Nick and I met each other many, many years ago when we first really started working very closely with Sage. Nick has worked for Sage, I think, for about 12 or 13 years, and most recently was Vice President of Product for the entire global operation of Sage. But he's now up sticks and left, and he's gone to Revolut, the Challenger Bank, as they're called. So big Challenger because they're challenging the original banking system of having high street banks with their big premises and their tellers hidden behind glass cages, etc., etc. Now, Revolut has formed a special division, Revolut Business, and Nick is going to be, well, he is, as of, I think, last Monday, is the Vice President for Growth. So it's his job to try and get far more small and medium-sized enterprises to link into Revolut. And he'll be coming along to talk about banking in general and challenger banking, and hopefully telling us that it's safe to switch to the bank. Is now a good time? Is it not a good time? What do they have to offer? Can they provide the business interruption loans, etc.? And it should be quite an interesting day. It'll certainly give you something to think about, because I know actually following Summit last year, we found out that a lot of our members are already using challenger banks and particularly using them for their clients. So that's all interesting. I don't know if you can see this that I have on today. Caryl Gibson said about my tie last week. It was a nice tie because I got musical instruments on it. You probably can't see that actually, but from top to bottom, this is a cartoon of somebody in Raffles Bar at the Raffles Hotel in Singapore making a Singapore sling. So he sort of goes out of focus as he's shaking madly. And I mention that because actually I'm very pleased to say that our guest today is actually Caryl Gibson. Hello, Caryl.
Hello.
Hi, sitting there way down in Devon.
That's it, in sunny, dry Devon.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Caryl is a member of the Advisory Council, but her main claim to fame, I think, is that last year at the Luca Awards, the Devon branch, of which she is chair, was awarded Branch of the Year. And Caryl also walked away with the Luca for Chair of the Year, which is the first time that anybody at branch has won the Luca for Branch of the Year, the same year that their chair has won Chair of the Year. So really good to have you with us, Caryl.
It's great to be here. Thanks very much for having me, Gary.
And I gather you are busy at the moment.
Yes, yeah. I think the first couple of weeks of lockdown have been reasonably busy, shall I say. First week, I spent a lot of time contacting clients saying, you know, don't panic. Something will have to give. And if you need any help, you know where I am. Last week was mainly going back to clients saying, okay, this is what I understand is happening. I'm getting daily updates. I signed up to receive the gov.uk automatic updates, and I think I emailed or mentioned on Friday to Amy up to that point, at 3 or 4 o'clock on Friday, I'd received 151 of the updates. I think I'm now up to about 259. I mean, I originally sent the link to gov.uk to my clients, and then once I saw the number of updates that were coming through, rang them and said, forget it. If you need to know anything, contact me. I'll do the reading. You continue to run your businesses where you can.
Yeah, we are getting a lot of feedback at the moment that clients, we've been a bit too quick, I think, some of you anyway, to pass things straight on to the client, and they are bamboozled, rabbits in the headlights a little bit. And I think also what we're finding from our members is they are asking the same question quite often, over and over again. Even though the information is available from Hmrc, I think they like the added benefit of getting something from ICB as well, because I think we select the best bits out. Although we carry everything, we tend to highlight things, and we do a Q&A, as you know. And I think that helps, because I think when you're struggling a little bit with time, and you've got your family to look after you've got your partner at home for the first time for a long time, where you haven't normally worked together, then on top of that, you've got all your clients in a similar state of panic and what have you. It can be very difficult to then plow through hundreds and hundreds of pages of legislation. But I think that's the way it's going. Now, you are you've got quite a business background from days before you actually moved into bookkeeping. I mean, just give us a quick rundown of what it is you've done exactly.
Is it easier for me to say what I haven't done?
It might be.
I mean, I started out way back in a university, Newcastle University, working in their admin office, basically handing out, in the old days where people used to get grants before they got loans, handing out the checks. I was a finance officer in Newcastle University. I then moved into banking because I had a friend who worked for Barclays Bank who said to me, well, they're recruiting. Why don't you come along for an interview? I didn't actually end up working for Barclays. I ended up working for the Co-op Bank. But that was quite interesting, sort of on their university graduate scheme. So I tended to move house every 6 months and moved into different branches all over the country. I'm originally from the northeast of England, and I've moved progressively southwards. I think my next move's got to be into the English Channel, because I can't move much further south from where I am now. But once I was in the co-op, I quite enjoyed looking at the accounts and things. My degree was a business studies degree with primary subject was accountancy. And in fact, more people that did my business studies degree went off and became accountants than anything else. And I had toyed with the idea because I actually enjoy the accountancy side of things. I think it's because I'm, as somebody said last week, you tend to be a bit OCD and you like to make, put chaos into good places. And with the co-op, I had the opportunity to join their finance house and moved into selling commercial mortgages. Now, that was really interesting because I was dealing with anybody from buying a small corner shop, news agency, sort of fish and chip shop, all the way up to multi-million-pound warehouses and hotels and restaurants and things. I did that until I had my daughter. I then took 5 years off to stay at home with her. And then when I went back, I actually went back to work for a building society, so selling mortgages again, but residential mortgages. So it's kind of a finance background.
So always finance, yeah. I'm not surprised about the number of people who took business and went into accountancy. I always think it's a bit like if you can't do it, teach. And a bit like accountants, they haven't got any business experience, but for some reason they seem to think that they can tell everybody how to run their business. I'm sure it's very similar, but it's good to know at least you've moved out into bookkeeping. So how long have you actually been in practice now?
In practice, I think it's actually coming up to, I'm just looking at my practice license, May 2017 I came into practice.
Right.
What I actually did was when the credit crunch hit, I was working for an estate agency. Actually, I'd left the building society and went to work for an estate agency on their financial side. So people going and buying a house would sort of talk to their mortgage advisor. I was made redundant from that job and decided that I was going to go and learn to cook properly. So I actually did a year's cordon bleu course and set up my own catering business. But then when the credit crunch hit, because I was doing sort of fine dining in people's houses, the first thing that went was, well, we're not going to pay you because we can cook our own dinners now. Okay, fine, fair enough. So a friend had a business. It was an insurance brokerage, and he just bought into another insurance brokerage. But he was a bit worried about some of the things that he was finding had gone on in the other brokerage, and asked me to go. He said, you know, with your business background, can you come in and have a look? And when I looked, I said, didn't anybody do a due diligence before you bought this? And he went, yes, my accountant. And I went, oh, right, okay, fine. There's a bit of a problem here. And it turned out that the previous broker had been defrauding. He had taken clients' premiums and not passed them on to the insurance companies.
Wow.
So I then was asked to go and work for the brokerage, basically to sort out the mess. And when the accountant left, they asked me if I'd take over doing the accounts, which I did. But then other people were coming back to me that knew that I could kind of do this. So that's when I sort of started with my husband, the company Garden Capital. And we used to go into businesses and set up processes for them. And it was off the back of that I thought, well, actually, I really still enjoy doing the accountancy, that I started to do the bookkeeping. And, you know, the usual story, I went to the insurance broker and said, right, I'm now going to set up my own bookkeeping practice. And he went, great, yeah, I'll be your first client.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant.
It goes from there. And he's actually still a client. He's still in Surrey. And I sort of have been, not at the moment, but go out there about once a month and spend a couple of days in the office. And it's a really nice relationship I have with them, because they, at the end of last year, they rang me up and said, when are you coming up in December? And I kind of flicked through the diary and gave them a couple of dates. And you know, why is it important? You don't normally ask me. I normally say to you, I'll be up whenever. And they said, oh, well, we're trying to book our Christmas lunch and we'd like you to come.
Oh, that's nice.
So they
Christmas seems a long time away, but you know, how well the lockdown goes, we might still be locked down, but I hope not. Although I think September sounds to be sort of the main date when we're looking at, certainly for people who've got any sort of vulnerabilities. And obviously, we wish everybody well who is suffering at the moment, particularly obviously Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister. You know, it's weird to have somebody running the country who's running it from a hospital bed, and he didn't look very good when he was on the other day, actually. And I was talking to June here and just saying, well, you know, he doesn't look very good, but yeah, he's obviously got worse. And I thought Prince Charles, in his presentation as well, seemed to be putting on a good face on it, but he looked a bit flushed and looked a bit laboured in what he was saying. But hopefully his mum, the Queen, sort of filled him full of enthusiasm. It's quite interesting. I don't know if you've seen any of the tweets that are going out. There are quite a few of we Brits who haven't been over complimentary, but the Americans seem to have really taken to the message from the Queen. Obviously, they're looking for a different style of leadership over there, so perhaps they think, you know, the time has come to actually invite the Queen back to take over. probably not, but anyway, it's just one of those things. If they hadn't done what they did, it wouldn't have been needed. But never mind. So you said one of your branch members has actually got the bug at the moment. You were saying earlier.
Yes, that's right. I had an email today from Tineke, who said, basically, just to let you know, I've been fighting the virus for the last 2.5 weeks. 2 weeks of a very high temperature, aches and pains everywhere, and the last week, chest problems, no taste or smell. I'm near the end of a course of antibiotics, but still have no energy whatsoever. I lost 6 kilos in weight, and am still not eating much. The worst of it all has been having to look after myself with no help at all, as no one is allowed near me. I've somehow managed to do payrolls in between, although on automatic pilot. Having said that, I am on the mend. It'll just take its time. It's a really horrible disease, and I sincerely hope you can all avoid it.
Yeah, well,
you know,
our best for her. I mean,
yeah,
it does sound really, really horrible, and the pictures of the people who are gasping for breath, because obviously there doesn't seem to be much that they can take to cure it. I think they get a ventilator or some sort of assistance, breathing assister, and just hope that the body battles away and wins. I think it's getting to be a worrying thing. Well, it is very worrying. We just hope we don't get it, because being short of breath is not much good, I'm afraid. But anyway, so I think you were saying earlier, you've actually been out and you've been contacting your clients, you've been talking to everybody. My big message, paraphrasing the old estate agents, as you mentioned, estate agents, the old estate agents adage of location, location, location. Well, with me, for us now, it's communication, communication, communication. We have got to communicate with members. We're communicating with members, obviously, but we have to, as bookkeepers, communicate with our clients and help them where they want it, and perhaps even persuade them where they think they don't want it, that it might be better to do things our way and get in there and help them. And I've been talking to a couple of our members who are saying that the clients they started off, I think, like you said, Caryl, really throwing their hands in the air, and we're all, that's it, we're closing up, we're going. Then the various packages came in. Then they're thinking more about their business and realizing that when this is all through, whenever that might be, everybody's going to want the same sort of stuff they had before. And so therefore, there will still be needs for their services, for their products. So let's see how we can get through this as best we can. And I know some of our members have been saying it's just so much work at the moment that's there. And even new clients coming through. And Sylvia Borhill was saying the other day, she's just picked up 2 new clients. And anyway, so yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I had an email last week, actually. We have what's called a business information point in Oakhampton, which is a government-backed facility. And I had an email saying that they got a couple of people that their current accountants had basically thrown in the towel, and could they pass on my details? So
yeah.
I can't see that there's any need for anybody to suddenly say, that's it, I'm never doing this again. I think it maybe is that perhaps some people who are getting close to retiring or whatever, taking this as the ideal opportunity. But I think just to leave people in the lurch is not particularly professional, shall we say.
We've had a couple of our members saying that they're picking up business where accountants are not. They don't use the cloud. They're basically still, everything is desktop. It's all done with paper. It's all done with visits. And they need somebody, it may well be only an interim thing, but they need somebody to get them through furloughing, get through their claiming and the business interruption scheme loan or whatever it is. And, that's the necessity at the moment. And I know a lot of accountants still haven't quite transferred across. I think about something like 98, 97% of our members are, for at least some of their clients, cloud-based. And I think the accountants at one stage, they were saying recently, they were quite proud that they're almost approaching 60% now. So that does leave a large percentage of people who perhaps haven't quite got the facilities for doing it. And it might be, yeah, as you say, they'd bring forward their retirement and decide to give up early. But I think when people sit down and think about it, hopefully most people will be able to continue along. But I do notice that we've covered this over the last however many days we've been doing this now, but the government is saying that there will be a massive audit at the end of this, and they want to make sure that only those people who have a good business actually start claiming money. They don't want to see people using this as paying people for the next 3 months or something or other, only to take the decision that they would have made back in, or were about to make back in February anyway, to pull up sticks and give up. So I think the government may be giving away a lot of money, but there will be a lot of questions as to why you claimed it, which is why I think having a bookkeeper, we know what to say, we know what a business is doing. It's always my worry for people who don't have bookkeepers that they may say something which sounds correct on the face of things, but isn't, and they might get themselves into a bit of trouble, but hopefully that won't be the case. So how many clients do you have at the moment?
At the moment, I've got a pretty small practice. It's 8 because I moved down here and I'm building up again. With my background, I've retained the insurance broker, so I still go up to Surrey every now and then, as I mentioned earlier. The other clients are all mainly in and around Oakhampton, and that's only it's a 20-mile round trip. You mentioned I'm in sunny Devon. I live in a little village in between Oakhampton and Launceston. So Oakhampton is Devon, Launceston is the capital of Cornwall. So they speak a completely different language, and I need a passport to go down there. Yeah. So it's
I mean, getting 8 clients in such a closed community isn't bad, is it? Because it is a little, it has a reputation for being a little bit, unless you've lived with them for 20 years, you're not accepted. But that's good.
Yeah, that's it. I think the reason I've been reasonably successful in and around the town is that when I first moved down here, I saw a Facebook group for a networking group in Oakhampton. Yeah. And I sort of turned up at the meeting, which was in a pub, which is always a good start, and found out that it was actually their first meeting, because what had happened was the local chamber had closed, stopped operating because they couldn't get anybody to serve on it, and a lady had thought, well, hang on, we still need businesses represented in the town, and had sent out just a general Facebook thing, anybody who's interested. I went along and we did the usual, who are you, what do you do? And I said what I did, and 3 people said, oh, I need to talk to you.
That's good.
Yeah, that's it. The thing is, Dan, the thing I've found sort of coming from Surrey, where everything moves at probably 90 miles an hour except the traffic, is that down here, the traffic moves at 90 miles an hour, but nobody else does. There's a saying in Cornwall that, when will you get this done? And it's directly. And directly works in Devon as well. So the first meeting was in October 2018, I think it was. No, 2017 was it? Yeah, October 2017. Of those 3 people who said, yes, I need to talk to you, one person, every meeting I go back to and say, you still want to talk? Can we have a look? Can I come along to see your business and what have you? Yeah. I'm quite happy to buy a coffee and what have you. I think it was the middle of January, one of them came to me and said, I need to do my tax return.
Oh, yeah.
That's
right.
it.
Yeah.
I then got the carrier bag, and I managed to get the tax return done. Although the client had to actually log in and do it because there wasn't enough time for me to act as an agent. And then from that, every meeting, this lady said how wonderful I was. So the other 2 came to me. But they're the ones who unfortunately have been hit a little bit by the lockdown. I've got a bed and breakfast, which at the moment is just signaling along. Luckily, the client has actually managed to obtain one of the grants, which is good. So that's going to keep her going for a while. Another one is a coffee shop, but unfortunately they're in rented premises, and the landlady actually gets the business grant. So they're sitting at home at the moment, which is a problem. That's a partnership. And the other, the one that I'm really pleased with is a lady. She had a very small niche cafe in Oakhampton. It was a vegan cafe, and yeah, very, very niche. But she had people that were coming down to Cornwall and would stop off and eat in her cafe because it was the only vegan cafe they could find in the area. She only had, I think it was 10 covers, and she made the decision at December last year to move into larger premises in Oakhampton. So from January, she was trading in a much larger place. I think it's got 24 covers now. And her turnover went up to £500 a day, and then suddenly went to zero when everybody was in lockdown. And what this lady has done, and I'm actually seriously considering putting her forward to some sort of award, is she set up the Oakhampton Community Hub in her. And what happens is anybody who wants to share anything, they come along, they leave the stuff there. She's doing a takeaway service, she's giving away food. All the other larger restaurants, there's a large Wetherspoons in Oakhampton, when they closed, they gave her all of their food stock. So she then gave it away in the town. She had a Facebook page where she'd sort of put on there saying, when life deals you lemons, make marmalade. And what she got was 15 kilos of lemons and limes. So she'd actually made lemon and lime marmalade as much as she could, and put that into the local food bank for people to have. And then it sort of put on there and said, you know, if you fancy having a go making it, here's my recipe, come along and you can take the lemons and limes. And she's doing that. And
I mean, I think people do stand up, don't they, when things happen? You know, I mean, there will always be people who are, you know, the bad guys who will be fiddling and various other things. But yeah, I think we've got some wonderful stories coming through. I haven't quite understood the whole story. I'm waiting to hear, but apparently Ron Dennis, who was the person that set up McLaren, he's been in touch with what's it called now, the hospital at Oxford, and his daughter, I think, is an anaesthetist there, and they're working so hard that they haven't been taking their meals. So what he's decided to do is he is going to, I haven't read how, but he's going to provide 1 million meals for medical staff who aren't getting their proper lunches. So he is going into local restaurants that were closed down and asking them to prepare food, which he's then going to deliver somehow to the hospital, John Radcliffe Hospital, that's the one. Now, whether or not that's just to the John Radcliffe Hospital and whether it's for a week or 3 months, I'm not really sure. I haven't read all about it, but yeah, you know, that's interesting. And I noticed that, still in Formula One, of course, Mercedes have converted their manufacturing centre to produce ventilators. So there's a lot going on out there that I think people really step up to the mark, and they can feel very proud of themselves. And I'm afraid I'm just stuck here in an office, but hopefully my little bit is coming on a daily basis and getting you all to talk to each other and giving you a little bit of the light at the end of this tunnel. We're going to get to the end of this tunnel sooner or later. I have that on good authority from Her Majesty, so it must be right. And I hope that's the case. Amy, if you're there, Amy Copeland, she's our anchor today. Amy?
Hello there, hi.
Is it you that's calling?
I was just on the other line to ICB HQ.
What are we doing? How are we doing on questions? Anything interesting?
We're not doing too badly, actually. So maybe everyone's just busy reading all the updates from the...
They've been listening to Caryl and her life story, which is great.
We've had Faye, of course. Faye always has loads of questions to ask. I did ask for clarification, but she's not come back to me. But basically, she seems to have a couple of clients that perhaps were not running an active payroll. So she says, I've got a new payroll contact, or she says new payroll contacts who still haven't completed their paperwork to get registered. So at the 28th of February, they didn't have active payroll. If they do get registered, will they get the funding? Presumably not. But it seems to me.
No, that has to be registered. Not yet. I thought actually the latest, I know we've been carrying this Hmrc guidelines for a long time, but that latest one, I mean, I read it from top to bottom, and it covers most angles. I think there are you know, most possibilities are covered there, so it's a good thing to read. Yeah, there haven't. I mean, I would say there haven't been any huge changes. It pretty much just gives a little bit of extra detail, and it definitely reinforces everything that we've been saying, which is good. And we got it right, I think, in all cases. Nothing terribly exciting. I mean, the main thing is right at the top. It says that they anticipate that you'll be able to start using the online service, the portal, by the end of April. So that's kind of new. Which is quite a time if you're having to pay people when no money's coming in. But you know, at least you know it is going to come back. So the business interruption loan scheme. So it's got CBILS, they're calling it now, isn't it? Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, CBILS. That's what everybody's talking about at the moment. So that's what that's to be used for. And the banks have been told now to be a little bit more, if it's not generous, I think that's probably not the word one would use with a bank, but a little bit more open to access of these funds that government is promising and government is backing, basically. So hopefully that is the case. We had a couple of people on Friday who said that their clients had already got some money, and I think we went virtually around the entire country, and bits of the country were getting their local council grants. Some others, I think Hampshire was one that wasn't yet, didn't seem to be getting the grants out. So perhaps if we've got somebody here from Hampshire that's applied for one of these grants, see if that is now trickling through. Because it's you know, people are going to need this money. Yeah, very much dependent on where you are, I think, isn't it, really, with that, whether it's available. Seems to be. Yeah, seems to be. I was just going to say that on the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme information page, it also does now specifically state that as a company director or other office holder, you can be furloughed. And so there's just a little bit more information about that, because I know Ellie Appleby was saying, I know you keep saying it, but I haven't seen it written down anywhere. So it is now official guidance. So and I think it also says that you can't do anything for a company which results in revenue or profit. But if you are a director and you are furloughed, you are, I think, still able to do most things that you are required to do merely to comply with the Companies Act. So in other words, if you've got to fill in a return, you've got to sign a VAT return, whatever it might be, then you can do that, because that's not regarded as bringing money into the business. If you're doing something which is bringing in money, then you can't be furloughed. And I know we had one of our members last week talking about one of her clients that was furloughing everybody, letting them work from home, but then asking them to ring up and sell. And that's obviously definitely not the spirit of what's expected, what the money is there for. There is also an answer there about the apprenticeships. Apprentices have to be paid the normal amount, but they must, gave me the impression that you've still got to pay the minimum wage, regardless of how low it gets as part of your 80%. I think that's if they're training. If the training is stopped, then they don't have to. It's just if you're training, and that applies to employees as well. If they're training, then they are due the minimum wage. But any training that is done is not regarded as working. So this was the great push for government. They want everybody to take this as an opportunity to take training. So if you are going to somewhere to do training, or you're doing training online, I suppose most of this would be doing now, that is not anything to do with running a business, although somewhere down the line it might enable you to earn a better profit because you've got better qualified people. It's not actually earning the business any money, is not earning any profit at this stage, and there is an active encouragement to do that. And we're actually finding that we are, all of our training providers are saying business is hot at the moment, because so many people are furloughed and they want something to do. And yes, they are doing training. Our exams are still fully functional, and we are getting a lot more exams coming through at the moment. So these are people who have perhaps kept, I don't know, not quite got as far as finishing their study before, because they've got business, they've got clients to look after, and they've treated themselves a bit like the cobbler's wife, never has a decent pair of shoes. So the bookkeepers looked after clients first rather than themselves. Now is the time, for some of them anyway, to have a little bit more time to do this. So they're rushing their way through. And I know we've got a lot of people who are moving up, trying to move up from member to full fellow of the institute, and the level 4 is proving very, very popular. So that level 4 just adds the cream on the cake as far as the bookkeeper is concerned. So
Yeah,
you can
Garry,
get all the figures. Sorry?
I was just going to say, I did the FRS 105.
Yeah.
And I'm actually currently going through the new DFS folder, which is the new level 4 thing.
Yeah.
So it's to move up from just doing the micro entities to actually FRS 102 1A.
Yeah.
And I was going great guns on the old studying before all of this happened, and then it just seems to, I don't know, I seem to have been more engrossed in helping everybody else, and sort of by the time it gets to sort of 5 or 6 o'clock at night and I've had something to eat, I think, do you know what, can't be bothered.
Yeah, I know. So you're seeing the other side of it. Yeah, and yeah, I think it's going both ways. It's really good, I think, though, that our members are generally reporting that things are looking reasonable. You know, they're not as bad as they thought they were going to be. And some of our members, like yourself, are saying they're very busy. And as I say, we've had lots of others who are saying they're actually picking up lots of new clients, because a lot of people who were doing things by themselves when they thought it was relatively simple, furloughing and the self-employment grants are available. It's not simple. And I think they suddenly need that bit of extra help and guidance. So it should be a good time for bookkeepers. Hopefully we can convince people that actually there is a good reason for having a bookkeeper, not just in the bad times, but, you know, a bit like it's not you don't want a dog just for Christmas. You've got to have one that you've got to keep for life. It'll be the same with the bookkeepers. You know, we'll get out there and we will become even better known as the people to help micro and small businesses. So you've obviously attempted now you're attempting now the 102, which is the next level up, which is the small business. Are you finding that this is because you're getting clients coming to you who are slightly larger, or is it that your clients are growing? I mean, or is it, what is it? Why have you decided to go for the higher level?
It's I think there are lots of small businesses. I mean, you know, the majority of businesses in the UK are small businesses, because to most people a £12 million turnover is not small. But that's what's classified as a small business. And there are lots of small businesses in the Oakhampton area that I guess I've been contacted by quite a few. And as I say, it's this directly thing that they're not happy with just seeing their accountant once a year, or if they've got to pick the phone up, they then get hammered with a bill because they spent 20 minutes talking to their accountant about something and they're charged for an hour. And you know, they're just not happy that they have a once a year meeting where the accountant says, well, this is what happened last year. And especially now, they're beginning to realise that what they actually need is somebody to say, well, this is what's potentially going to be happening in the next 3 months, doing a cash flow forecast. And I just thought, well, if I can look at things like that and then say at the end of the day, well, actually, if you don't want to use your accountant, I can actually do everything for you. It's going to be better. The thing I have found down here in Devon is that once somebody makes a connection, they like to keep that connection. They want you to do everything. I'm looking at things. I don't actually do payroll. And
oh, right.
I don't know why I didn't bother. Well, I do know why I didn't bother. I didn't want to do payroll, full stop. But
it's one of our most popular supplementary qualifications, actually, payroll. And
Yeah.
we have a lot of people who just do payroll. They're not bookkeepers. They make a living out of doing payroll. And, you know, so they're in big demand at the moment, obviously. And the self-assessment tax, that's another one, which is something which is, it's something that accountants and tax advisors charge a lot of money for, even for the most simplest of forms that are required, you know. I think some of our members decide not to go this far because they want to stay just looking after the, I don't know, up to trial balance or whatever they decide to do. And as I've said before, when we've been doing either conference or Inspire Talk, it doesn't really matter what type of bookkeeper you want to be, as long as you want to be the best that you can. We're happy then that we are there to help you and assist that. So if you are, you know, you're running from your sitting room, living room, or kitchen or bedroom or wherever it is, and you want half a dozen clients, and that's good enough for you, then that's good enough for us, as I say, as long as you have the highest possible standards. But likewise, if you want to be one of the people like some of our members who want several branches, they want 20, 30 staff, in one case 50, I think it's 53 staff now, then we're there as well, because the bookkeepers fill a niche in the market, and the market moves, the bookkeepers move with them. So it's whatever they can do. All I would say is never do something that you don't feel happy doing. One, because it breaks all the rules as far as ICB is concerned, but two, I think you and your clients will very soon realize that you're in deep water, and you shouldn't be there. And I think I mentioned it already. I've done quite a few of these things, so I can't remember whether I have or not, but I think I mentioned already that we got a call one day from the Financial Reporting Standards Council, the Hmrc, and they said, we'd like you to have a word in the ear of one of your members. I said, oh dear, what's happened? They said, well, he's just signed off an audit. Well, obviously, as everybody knows, you have to be regulated to be an auditor. You become a chartered accountant, and then you go on to become an auditor. So it's pretty high up stuff. And you can't do that unless you are a chartered accountant. And they said, we don't think it's in the public interest to take him to court, but if you could have a word with him and tell him never to do it again. So I rang him up and said, you've just done an audit. Oh, yes. I said, well, you're not supposed to do it. He said, well, yes, I do know that. I said, so why did you do it? He said, because my client asked me to. And the thing is, clients will keep pushing the bubble if they think they're going to save a bit of money on their accountant. And saving money on the accountant is not really what we as bookkeepers should be doing. You know, we're not giving them a cost advantage. What we're doing is saying, actually, for the type of business you have, for the type of business you want, I'm the best person for this job, because I'll come and see you regularly, I'll talk you through everything, and I can do everything because I'm qualified. And I think that's quite an important thing, that we don't get carried away. And I think one of the things that we quite often chase people up for is that they're not qualified to do payroll, but they have a dabble. Well, now they're going to really find out that they shouldn't be dabbling, or, you know, things get complicated or anything else. Talking of not getting things quite right, you mentioned before, Caryl, that you've just had a call from Jane Hardwick from our compliance department. What was that about?
I recently updated my website, and I had completely forgotten, I have to hold my hands up, I'd completely forgotten that where you have your ICB crest on the website, underneath that there has to be the link to the ICB website. And I had put my crest on the front page, on the home page of my website.
Well, thank you for that.
And I hadn't put the link. But the link is actually, I actually do have a page of links, and the link was on that page, but it does need to go underneath the crest together with your practice license number. So yeah. My first job when I finished this broadcast is to go onto my website and rectify that little problem.
Right. Well, anyway, thank you, Jane, for pointing that out. If you're listening in today, I haven't looked at the list to see who's on today, actually, but anyway, thank you for that. Yeah, it's something that members do forget, but when HMRC is looking at clients and then who looks after them, they will try and find a link on the website. If there isn't a link, then they don't know who to chase up to see if you are a member of good standing. So it's something that they do a lot of. I mean, we get a surprising number of calls from HMRC checking up on people, which they haven't done before, but over the last couple of years, we've all come under much greater scrutiny under, obviously, the good old money laundering regulations, but they're using that as an excuse, I think, to follow up on a lot of things. And in fact, the wording has either changed or at least been highlighted more recently, that as a supervisory body, we actually authorize people to be in practice, and we have to authorize people. So if we don't give people authority, they cannot trade as a bookkeeper, or one of us or one of the other bodies don't give authority. So we've got some quite strong powers in there that you read them, it sort of makes your eyes water a bit, but we hope never to have to use them. A nice little call from Jane is good enough as far as we're concerned, as long as that's a good one. However, where I think I might mention this now actually because this has come up, where a couple of our members have come unstuck over the last couple of weeks is they've forgotten to tell us that they've become a limited company. So they're trading as Jane Blogs, I always call it Jane Blogs, trading as Jane Blogs Bookkeeping. But about sort of 12 months ago or whatever, they upgraded and became Jane Blogs Limited, and they forgot to tell us. Now, first of all, that's breaking all the rules, because if they're trading as a limited company instead of the self-employed company, the limited company doesn't have a practice license. You can't switch the licenses between companies because they're different legal entities. It's a bit like saying, well, I've just bought a new car, I've just switched the tax disc. They don't have discs anymore, do they? But you know what I mean, those of you who are old enough to remember tax discs. So you can't do that sort of thing. And where one or two of them has come a cropper is that they've tried to claim for being now a person with the PAYE, but HMRC is checking up with us to say, well, hold on a minute, we've got this person down as self-employed, what have you got them as? And we say, oh, we've got a, or I think it, one, him and three, hers, as self-employed. What's happening here? So we have to be very careful. So those of you who have inadvertently slipped your mind that you are supposed to tell us, if you have changed to become a limited company, please let us know. And the other thing somebody got caught out on recently, in the days just before we were all locked down, one of our members had a tax investigation, and her business was, as far as we were aware, just her. It was a limited company. She didn't tell us that her husband and her 21-year-old son were also directors. They were shareholders, and she hadn't told us. She said, oh, well, they have nothing to do with the business. Well, in legal terms, according to Companies House, which is what this is all based on, there were 3 people who were principals of that business. So anyway, she had to put that right pretty quickly, because we need a DBS for everybody that has any form of beneficial ownership of a business. And even if at the moment they've got nothing to do with the business, if anything unfortunate happens to our member, it does mean that the other 2 would then be owning the business. So we have to make sure that they haven't got criminal convictions and all the rest of it. But anyway, so Amy, anything cropping up, or are all the questions being answered on the Q&As now?
No, we've got some questions.
Okay.
I was just going to say that we've got Danny and Jay, who are representing Devon.
Ah, hello.
So Danny was just saying that she knows several smaller accountants in Devon that have been taken over rather, by bigger firms who are now providing a less personal service. And Danny is now being approached by some of these clients that are coming over from such firms over the last year because they're not getting the service they want.
That's brilliant. We keep saying to our members, if you become remote, you're going to become an accountant and you're going to have the same problems. So, we learn from the mistakes these accountants make. People do want a personal service. But I think also it's not necessarily the accountant's fault. But the accountant's training and their whole way of life is based on this compliance accounting at the end of the year, picking the nuggets, the businesses that are going to grow, and then, finding them funding or buyouts or whatever else it is. And they don't really expect their members to be bookkeepers. So they don't do this bedside manner, as I call it. A bit ironic now with the lockdown, but anyway, it's you know, it's that what makes bookkeepers somewhat different, I think, and it's our main difference, and it's one we must really hang on to. And some of our members are charging rates which are getting very close to being accounting rates. So people value that service. And one of the things that I always try to do at conferences is say that you're all really important people, you're highly qualified, you know your stuff, you're necessary to business. And we have to start to value ourselves more highly. And then I think the whole profession will grow.
I think you're right there, Gary. I think a lot of, as I said earlier, a lot of accountants only make contact once a year, or even once a quarter if they're doing the VAT returns. And I've found when I take on a new client, I always go and visit. It was always a thing that I had from my finance days anyway. When you're looking to from a bank, you're going to fund the purchase of a business or fund business expansion. The one thing you need to do is get an idea of what the business is capable of doing or has done in the past. So I would always go out to visit the business, and probably very often, depending on the size of the loan, have to spend all day at a business. The number of times I've gone into a hotel, gone up to the reception desk to ask to see the owner or whoever, to be asked, well, you know, what's in connection with, and I've pretended to be a fire officer, someone from the insurance company to check things through, just so that I could walk around and have a look. And I think our clients appreciate that. When I take on a new client now, I always go and visit their business, and I'll spend a couple of hours there, perhaps. I recently took on a new client who has a bed and breakfast, and I sort of turned up. She made me a nice cup of tea, and we were sat there chatting. And then I said, "Well, can I have a look around?" And she went, "Oh, my accountant's never done that. In fact, my accountant was here." And I went, "No, yeah." And she said, "Well, what do you want to know?" I said, "No, I just want to get a feel for what the business is." And it's a beautiful. I think it's a 17th century property. So it's got its own little quirks. It's got little back stairs and, you know, rooms that slope, but I mean, fantastic views and things. And yeah, it's a really nice place. And she was contacting me purely and simply because her accountant was in her words, charging her an arm and a leg, and had never actually been to the place. She couldn't see what he was doing anyway for the money, because all he did was do her self-assessment tax return. And she wanted somebody to come and have a look to see whether she could save money. Now, you know, I said I quote on fixed rates. I don't work on an hourly rate. I sit down, have a look, and see what I think is going to be. I use my experience to think, well, yeah, this is probably going to take me X amount of time. I'll quote for this. And she was happy with what I was quoting, but she said, that equates to X per hour. And I went, well, probably around about that. She said, well, that's a bit expensive. But she'd already she was a nutritionalist, which was a second stream of income for her, and that she charged £100 an hour. And I went, well, why do you think you're worth £100 an hour when I'm not? And she said, yeah, point taken. I mean, my fee wasn't the equivalent of £100 an hour. I'd really like to try and get that, but I think that I'd be one of those usurious accountants at the end of the day. But you know, that's the argument. I think a lot of people, especially when they're first starting out in practice, I see a lot on the Facebook forums of, you know, what should I charge for doing this? The answer is, how long is a piece of string? But my argument always to people when they say, well, that's a bit expensive, I'll say, well, compared to what?
Yeah, well, you're obviously cheeky enough to say that, you see. I mean, some of our members obviously haven't quite got that experience. I mean, yeah, it is really difficult. And you know, we have stories from members. I was talking to one lady recently. She was saying she got hourly rate now up to £45. And she did it because she found out that the owner of the business was paying £50 an hour for his dog walker. 2 dogs. He said, yeah, but that's only £25 an hour. She said, no, it's not. It's one dog walker. The dogs go out at exactly the same time. Anyway, she wanted 50, didn't get it, but she came out with 45, and that was an increase of I think £15 an hour. And it worked with him, and it isn't always going to work. We must be fair about this. Some people will say, well, that's all right. I'll find somebody down the road who tells me they're a bookkeeper, even if they're not. That doesn't matter to me. And to be honest with you, there will always be people who do that, but they deserve what they get. And the other thing is that if anything goes wrong with their accounts, increasingly now businesses are being asked, well, why? How did you pick your bookkeeper or your accountant? Did you ask them questions? And they're saying that you're more culpable if you haven't taken due care when appointing a bookkeeper or an accountant. So it's all good for us. It's great, but we will see. And the other thing is that I'm constantly telling our members, when you're employing somebody, some of you come forward and say, look, I'm going to employ somebody. Can I put the job vacancy on the Find a Bookkeeper on the ICB website? Yeah, absolutely. It's free of charge. And then we look at what they want to pay, and we bring them up and say, hold on a minute, you're wanting to pay this person about 50 pence more than the basic wage. Oh, well, yeah, but exactly. But if you're going to pay bookkeepers that, how can you claim that your clients should pay bookkeepers more? You've got to have a better sense of what you're doing to the profession as a whole. You make everybody work better if they're getting paid. Caryl, I mentioned earlier on that you got the Luca for Branch Chair of the Year, and your branch got Luca of the Year. You mentioned that you've got a branch meeting this evening. Obviously, that is now going virtual. And I was just looking across the country, our virtual meetings are going absolutely like hotcakes. I'm just trying to see what you've got. You actually, where are we? Exeter branch tonight. Yeah, you've now got 29 people booked in, which I think is somewhat of a record for your branch. So this going into virtual is opening up the avenue for a lot more people to be able to become part of this hub, a part of your community.
Yeah, I think it does help. I know a lot of people, we did talk about it at a branch meeting at the end of last year, and I sort of mentioned the thought that perhaps we could run virtual meetings, and the general consensus from the people who were there were that they still wanted that face-to-face contact. And I think there are always going to be people who do want to sort of look at the whites of your eyes while you're talking to them, which is nice. I'm quite happy to do that. But there are those I think we've got to be conscious of that can't always make a meeting. And I think that's what's really good with these virtual meetings. I mean, we're proving it now with what we're doing now. Perhaps going forward, there may well be the opportunity to run virtual meetings at the same time as the face-to-face, that people could log in to a face-to-face meeting. I think the other thing as well is that people who have never been to a branch meeting, I know how difficult it is. I remember turning up at my first branch meeting and wandering around outside and having a stiff gin and tonic before I went in there, because it's very difficult sometimes to walk into somewhere on your own where you don't know anybody. The nice thing was that I was made to feel very welcome, and I do my best as a branch chair to do the same when somebody new comes to one of our meetings. But I am appreciative that there are people who find it difficult to come into things for the first time. And hopefully, by attending one of these virtual meetings, they get to know what we all look like. They know that we're not going to
a bit more confident.
Yeah, but, gives them a bit more confidence to actually come up and come to a virtual an actual meeting. I think one of the things we did for the first time in the branch last year was that we started to meet about half an hour earlier in the bar. I mean, in the past, we've always just turned up for the meetings and left after the meetings. Now we started to come up about half an hour earlier and meet in the bar. So we have a little bit of a chin wag, bit of networking, and socialising. And then at Christmas, our meeting in December, I just got in touch with the hotel where we hold them and said, do you have a bar menu or whatever that we could maybe book a meal? And we all ate in the room where we hold the meeting. And that was the first time we'd had that. And the general vote was, yeah, we want to do that again. And maybe we were planning on having something in sort of June or July, but that's kind of gone by the wayside.
Gone by the wayside a bit, yeah.
Well,
I think that we're going to have to look at this once we come out. Everybody's saying the whole world will change. I think if past disasters have told us anything, it's everybody during the disaster said the whole world's going to change, but as soon as the disaster is over, whatever it might be, it doesn't really. Whatever it might be, we get back to normal very quickly. We get to like the things that we do. I think the online stuff will remain a part of what we do, but people do like to meet. And people were a bit disappointed when we had to make our Inspire Tour virtual, because we used to get over 1,000 people every year to our Inspire Tour, and they like meeting. But we're doing that now as virtual because that is later this month, and look out for information about that. But as far as the conference is concerned, people are queuing up. We haven't put the tickets online yet. We've said when it takes place, we're saying where it is, some of the things that we're going to have on there. But we've got a huge queue. We've got hundreds of people just waiting to pay because they want that social interaction with their members. So I don't think we're going to jump one way or the other. I think it's just going to be a mix, and we're going to have to play it by ear. But if you think about it, you're doing yours tonight, and then we've got Cambridgeshire. What else have we got here? South Glamorgan, that's the Cardiff branch. Oxfordshire, Surrey, North Yorkshire, Gloucestershire. I mean, that's all happening within the next 2 weeks. I mean, we've got 30 odd of these running at any one time. It's fantastic to think we've got around about 1,000 people coming to these meetings now each month, which is fantastic. So yeah, I think everybody has problems, but out of this, we are perhaps able to get to slightly more of our members. I mean, these sessions that we're running, we get members that book on through the website, we get people coming in through the Facebook, and then afterwards we get people who download this and, believe it or not, sit through this late at night when having a tea or something. But we're bringing in well in excess of 2,000 people at a time, which is just unbelievable. And I sent an email out that some of you responded to, join me for a cup of coffee and let's try and get through this together. Over 7,500 people opened that email. And that is a little bit higher than we would normally expect. But yeah, so we've got around, 48,000 or something or other that we write to on a regular basis, or students or members or whatever. So I'm told that getting 25% of a group to open an email is virtually unheard of. So I'm very pleased and proud of that. So thank you all for opening emails and doing everything else for it. I've just been passed a message actually by June to say that Hmrc are doing, or were before this, doing the rounds, and we mentioned Carol's problem with her crest, and they are finding people who are claiming to be our members and putting the crest on the website, and they regard us as a fraud. So they will be taking this up, something we've wanted them to do for years. So that's great. If any of you come across somebody who you don't think is a member, who doesn't seem like a member, but they're using our crest, using our letters after their name, let us know, because we can do a bit of research ourselves. That's what Jane Hardwick does, among other things. But then we can report them, and we can do something about it now. The big push at the moment with government is to get everybody qualified. They're not exactly saying that, but that's the way it's moving. What they're actually saying is that everybody within a practice should be competent. And so they're not quite putting it down and saying you've got to have a qualification, but we think that's what they mean. Amy, we're getting towards the end of our session at the moment. Is there any particular question there that needs to be answered?
We have got a few questions, yes. Yeah, absolutely. They're all, adding up now. So just a couple of things. Just going back to Faye's payroll issue. She's got another client who was running payroll, and then their payroll provider disappeared, went AWOL, clearly not an ICB bookkeeper, and he has been continuing to pay his staff, but actually not running the payroll properly.
Well,
do we think they can still claim?
I think Faye will need to sort out what should have happened, make sure that it was being done legally, or at least put it into the legal framework, and then do that very quickly and then claim from there. But I think she is going to have to go to Hmrc and say, this is what it should have been. She's now taken over. The onus is on the previous bookkeeper or whoever. But really, you've got to sort it out. You've got to make sure that it's not somebody claiming that it was done wrong by some fictitious bookkeeper in the hope that they can bump up the salary. And we, as you know from listening, those of you who listen to these programs so far, we have a number of members saying that their clients are now claiming that actually they didn't mean to pay a dividend; it was due to be a full salary. There is no going back. It's as black and white as it can be. But if you've been part of a malfunction, let me call it that way to be gentlemanly, by a bookkeeper, I think you've got good reason to be able to say, look, it was wrong, I'm putting it right. I believe, I'm a nice bookkeeper, and I believe it was not fraudulent or it was not intentional, and therefore this is what I think. It has to stand up to an audit afterwards, basically.
So do you remember at the end of last week, Jude had some questions. So she said that one of her employers wasn't going to pay the staff and was going to wait until the rebate came back in. And we now know that hopefully will be by the end of April. And Jude was wondering what she should ethically do, whether she should run the payroll anyway. I think this was a tricky question because the employer in question, she had reason to think that they had the money to pay, they just didn't want to. Whereas I would thought if you knew it was a matter of not having the money, you know, that employer is going to be in more trouble if they can't claim the rebate. But I don't know if you've had any more thoughts. Well, Carol's got any thoughts on that? I
mean, according to the rules, you have to pay, and you are supposed to take out the CBIL, the business interruption loan, in order to be able to pay that salary. And then you claim it back and immediately repay the loan if that's what you can do. There is no leeway, as far as I can see, anywhere in the latest updated instructions on that at all. If the company has got money, then that's a black and white case, I'm afraid. You're holding back money.
And can you run the payroll?
Sorry?
But can the bookkeeper run the payroll? Because presumably, it would be
terrible
for it to happen, but it must have happened before. The payroll's been run, but the money's not gone out.
Right.
Am I right?
Yes, you have to run the payroll because that form is required, exactly the same as you fill in a VAT return. You might submit the return, well, not so much now with MTD, but you fill in the return. If the client then doesn't sign the check or doesn't do the transfer, that is down to them. But if our member knows that this is happening, then they must report that to Hmrc. Confidentially, of course, not tell the client that you're doing it, but I would complete the form. If in any doubt, perhaps ask Hmrc first and say what's happening, and perhaps they will give a guidance. They probably won't. They'll probably tell her to go on and do it, but then call them back if the money isn't paid. Because if they go to Hmrc first and say, this is what I think is going to happen, this is what the client has told me, the client could actually turn around and say, no, of course I was always going to pay it. It's the bookkeeper overreacting, and then he hasn't been caught out. So basically, he's got to get to a situation where he hasn't actually made the payment before you can accuse him of anything. Otherwise, all these people living at home with their kids who are threatening to murder them at the moment, they can't be done for murder. Anyway, carry on.
You might save a life. But anyway, so Sean, by the way, says that she's run several payrolls for April, all different, one normal, some all furlough, and one a top up for a part furlough of the month. So that's interesting. somebody has anonymously asked if they, so this is an interesting one, if the member of staff is furloughed and then come back for a week and get more money because the national minimum wage has been increased as of 1st of April, and they get re-furloughed, because we know now that you can do that, you can rotate your staff and go on and off furlough, as long as it's for a minimum of 3 weeks at each time. They're wondering if the furlough calculation is based on this new rate of pay for the second period of furlough, or whether it reverts back to the February. I think it's quite definitely the February calculation still.
It is. The only thing reading through those updates this morning, I have a feeling there it says that you can't pay below the national minimum wage at all. So if the national minimum wage, that's not the case. No, okay.
No. So the national, you can pay below the national minimum wage if the 80% of the salary as at 28th of February would be below the national minimum wage. That's fine, unless that member of staff is undertaking training. And obviously, if they're an apprentice, they've got an apprenticeship minimum wage, and if they continue their training, they must be on at least that. Yeah.
So basically, I mean, it said it right throughout. It's the 28th of February or nothing. It doesn't matter what happened on the 29th or the 1st of March or anything else. Doesn't count. It's all down to the 28th.
Unless we hear different, but I think that's what Ian Holloway as well said last week, didn't he? The payroll man, or the guru as we called him. So yeah, I think that's so. Basically, if you want to give somebody a pay rise subsequently, then you have to chop that up yourself, and that will not be covered by Hmrc. So yes, Jace now just from Devon was saying that she has got the grant through from one of her clients. That's exciting. But Lynn in Hampshire says nothing is happening in terms of grants, and we're waiting for the portal to be available. So still very hit.
So that's Hampshire again. That's bad.
Bad in Hampshire, yeah. Okay, so Barry Peake, he did ask this question last week. And he's still feeling a bit uncertain because there is no information stated in the guidance yet. So he's got a client who's, they had employees who were employed in February, but they didn't get paid until March. So they get paid in arrears, they started in February, and therefore they were not technically on the payroll in February, but they were employed. And he just wants to know, what sort of confirmation is there so that these people can make a claim?
What date in February were they employed then?
Before the 28th of February.
But they decided not to pay them for the odd couple of days. They'd lump it into the following month.
Exactly. So he said, so basically they weren't in time to be.
I don't think they get anything. Because you could fiddle it. You could put a lot of people on there that weren't actually on it by saying, oh, well, they were taken on before the 28th, but we hadn't had a chance to put them on the payroll. I understand that is correct. I would take some legal advice if you think otherwise. But that's as I understand it. It's the 28th or nothing. So one thing it did say is if you make people redundant after the 28th because you think your company's going down, but now because of government help, you think, actually, I don't need to make them redundant. You can take that redundancy back from them, put them back on the payroll because they were actually already on the payroll, and then you can furlough them. That's one of the odd things that can take place after the 28th. But I don't think putting anybody on afterwards, however much you think, oh, well, I just forgot or whatever, because if you're employing people, you're supposed to put them on any payroll that goes through. Otherwise, you're not paying people properly. That's my understanding.
Well, I don't know what Caryl thinks about this. I mean, from what Ian was saying last week is, you've got to be true to what you think the intention of the legislation or the guidance is. And I would say that actually, if this person was employed beforehand, that is still in line with the intention of the legislation, which it does specifically say, the guidance says, if they were employed following the 28th of February, then you can't furlough them. But I would think it's definitely open to debate. I mean, at ICB, we had somebody that came on board just at that very last week of February, and I don't think they were on the payroll run in February. You could ask Julius, the FD, but they were technically employed And they, you know, and that they ended up getting paid for those 2 days or whatever. Yeah, because if you run your payroll, some people don't run their payroll at the very last day of the month, do they?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I don't actually do payroll, but from my understanding, if you've got a contract of employment that says your start date is, let's say, the 25th of February, then you were on the payroll as of the 28th, even though you hadn't actually received any salary as at that date, but you would have had an indication in your contract of what your salary was, so you would know what the salary was at the 28th.
I think if it's down to the bookkeeper has to be confident that they don't think that anybody's trying to do a fiddle. And if they can put their hand on their heart and say, I believe this, and that, you know, you've seen the contract of employment, you've seen the interview dates in a diary or something like this, so you know that this isn't a last minute thing, then perhaps, I think it's what Ian Holloway said. If you believe you can stand up and argue your point, Hmrc will be happy, provided it doesn't seem that everybody's trying to get their relatives and everybody else and their mates next door onto the PAY scheme so that they start getting some money.
Yeah, I also think as well that presumably the new starter will have filled in the new starter form for Hmrc. So that again is proof that they were on the payroll as of the 28th.
Which
and
Danny
can P45 and various other things, you know.
Starter form. And interestingly, Darren and Graham says that actually does seem to corroborate what Ian said in the web. I think it's interesting because it's two men, which is sort of more men than we've had interacting with us recently. So that's great. And of course, replying to Barry Peake's questions, so it does prove that they are out there.
Well, 74% of our members are women, but that does mean that 26% are men. So, you know, they are
78.5% actually, because we all got in trouble. Do you remember? June told us off and double checked the accurate figures, as she always is doing.
So what's
78.5%?
How many, sorry?
78.5%.
Oh, that's harder for me to remember.
Of ICB members, I know, it's a bit difficult, isn't it? So that's exciting. So I would say, you know, just do make use of the ICB's HR and employment advice line. You can call them, just ring our main number between 8:30 and 5:30 p.m. And if you've got a specific case.
And don't forget Claire Warner is on tomorrow. Now, Claire Warner is another, what we call payroll guru. So she works for, you know, she works totally in payroll. So she is a good person to ask. So please come on tomorrow, 3 o'clock again, and ask her some questions, and as she's an expert in her field, you'll be pleased to know, say even less, and let her have a say, because I think she'll have a lot of good information for us.
So Maggie's got a couple of questions about maternity leave and how that's calculated, and Jude's got another question about a couple of days of payroll. I think, if you don't mind, if you could ask them tomorrow. I think that's a good idea because we've got another payroll expert on tomorrow.
Yeah. I think basically if you're on SMP or sick pay SSP, you continue with that. You can be furloughed once you come off. But if you are on sick, you can actually come off sick and earn more money by being furloughed. I don't think there's a problem with that. But you have to come back through the due process.
Because you can do that if you're on statutory maternity pay as well. If you're on leave, you can come off your leave early and get more money. If you could get more money being furloughed.
But you have to be careful that doesn't jeopardise your other benefits from having had SSP.
Yeah, and then you can't change your mind and go back on maternity leave. So that's something worth considering. You have to have at least 2 weeks, which you'd probably definitely need, I would think. But the question was about how much, what you base the returning salary and furlough calculation on.
Well, if the person is employed, even though they're on sick pay or maternity pay, there is a salary associated with that position because they're going back to the position at some stage. So it's whatever they would have been earning on the 28th of February had they not been on sick or had they not been on maternity leave. And the other thing is that if you look at the figures, and rather than take my word for it, but if you go onto the link and look at this Hmrc stuff, it does talk about bonuses and various other things. You know, you can work those into your averages, but not tips. nothing that was cash. Surprise, surprise, they're buttoning down the cash payments.
I was just going to say, actually, as you've mentioned that, I think there's been a bit of a change on what you can claim for.
There has, it's been opened out a bit more.
Because before they were saying you can't claim for fees and bonuses.
You can now.
Or is it?
Provided it's averaged out properly. And there's a lot about averaging out. So it's worth reading. It's not that long a document. It is worth reading. Go onto our website. You said before, the bar across the top of the website, go into resources, then hit COVID-19, and all of the information is there. It is also available on Hmrc, but we've drawn together information from several different sources, including our very own Jackie Mount, our technical advisor. Most of you know Jackie. So she's added her experience to this whole thing, which I think is useful.
Yeah, but just the sort of headline information that I think is worth noting is that prior to Saturday, the information was that you can't claim for fees, commission and bonuses, but now it says you can claim for any regular payments you are obliged to pay your employees. This includes wages, past overtime, fees and compulsory commission payments. However, discretionary bonus, including tips and commission payments and non-cash payments, should be excluded. So that is a bit of a change there.
And I think it's down to the terminology, the difference between a bonus and a cash bonus and a statutory bonus and an aggregated bonus and everything. You need a lot of this, even with this guidance, is down to the bookkeeper feeling satisfied in his or her own mind that it is right, and it's giving people a fair aggregate salary, average salary.
Have we got a couple more minutes just to answer some questions about the self-employment income scheme?
Yeah, just a second. Caryl,
yeah,
you're still there. Obviously, we're doing all these questions, so we're sort of ignoring you a little bit. I know you're extremely busy. You have it. Hang on. Do you want to say your cheerios, and we'll catch up with you at some other stage?
I'm quite happy to hang on. I'm okay for the time being.
Great. Thank you very much.
Because actually, Caryl might have an opinion on this one. So Lee has got a client who's been on self-assessment and has been self-employed for a few years, and had just decided to go incorporate, become a limited company, partly due to clients' concerns about IR35, which of course the changes have been delayed. And so what they wanted to do was go limited as of 1st of April. The company was set up a couple of weeks ago with the view to start trading on the 1st of April. Can they still claim under the self-employed income scheme? They meet all the other requirements. Obviously, one of the requirements was that your intention is to continue trading self-employed for the next tax year.
Is this a client or one of our members that's doing this?
This is Lee, one of our members, asking on behalf of a client.
Right. My reading of this is that they can remain as self-employed people even if they're running a limited company as well. So if you ignore the fact that they are running a limited company, presumably they haven't. You don't stop being a self-employed person until your final tax return, really, other than in telling everybody you're now becoming a limited company. So I would think that he could claim as a self-employed person for the time being. Actually, he's better off as a self-employed person because he can claim and work.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree with that. Because the announcement was that it was an average of the past 3 years self-employment income, as long as that was more than 50% of your total income.
Yeah.
So it's still right, because the previous 3 years, more than 50% of his income was as a self-employed person.
You wouldn't be able to claim for the limited company. I mean, some members do have self-employed income and limited income. I mean, we have a lot of farm secretaries in membership, and they quite often have bookkeeping, but they also are part of a farm, which is a limited company. Just because you're in one and the other, you can actually claim both. But so therefore, with this, I think it's pretty black and white on that one. You would claim as a self-employed person.
Yeah, I agree there.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. Great. All right. There you go, Lee. Another question from Amit Seda, our branch chair from London.
Oh, hi, Amit. Hello there.
I had another question about the trading profits, basically, on which the self-employment scheme is based on. If a self-employed person had unrelieved losses from the 16-17 tax year, will that be classed as a minus amount or zero profits? Profits have been made in 17-18 and 18-19. So how will the average be calculated? Because obviously the average is calculated. If you have been trading for those 3 years, they will look at the average profit, won't they, over those last 3 years? Do you have any idea about that, Caryl?
I would, I'm not certain, but I would say that if they're unrelieved losses, then the profit would be zero for that year, wouldn't it? So you would effectively average over the 2 years.
Yeah, I think you can select those years if you know, because that could be the year that you set up, in which case you've got hardly any income coming in, and then you move into your first full year and your second full year. I don't think that is the word of the legislation, or whatever it is not to try and catch you out for doing that, because they do say that if you've only been trading for 6 months, again, you have to average that out. So I think it's when the actual income is coming in properly, then I would go for that. Again,
I don't know if that's what the guidance states, and the guidance does say it's the 3. They will add together the total trading profit for the last 3 tax years and then divide by 3. So I don't know. I don't know if you can just pick and choose which when you want to think of yourself as having started.
It's one we should take some advice on, I think, and we'll perhaps bring that one up tomorrow.
What I was going to suggest is that because Hmrc will contact people who are eligible for that scheme, that maybe you wait until Hmrc has contacted you and then bring it up then. But I mean, that doesn't help you plan, obviously.
No, it's probably a good idea, because once Hmrc are contacting everyone, our members would be able to come back and say, well, I had a client that had this situation and this is what Hmrc said. So we would then get definitive answers.
Mm. So do you think they should speak to somebody at Hmrc? Do you think they get an answer?
Yeah, we can do that. We can get through. I've been speaking to them, so yeah, let's do that.
So is it, so ultimately, is it the trading years in which there was a trading profit only? Or will it be all of the last 3 years if they have been trading for the last 3 years, no matter what?
Let's hope it wasn't a big loss, but it was a good couple of years worth of trading, if that's the case.
Yeah, because I mean, I know I've got a client who set up about 2 and a bit years, but for the 2 full years, they made trading losses. So they don't get anything, we think, because there were no profits. You know, we can portion the losses, that would be nice, but
yeah,
because obviously the first year they invested an awful lot of money into the business. So yes, they had quite a large loss. Second year there was a very smaller loss, a much smaller loss, but it was still a loss. This year they were heading for a nice profit.
That is going to be a difficult one.
Yeah.
Okay, again, the guidance that we've been given is that it's up to the accountant stroke bookkeeper if they feel confident to put it forward, but be prepared to ask some pretty tough questions afterwards if Hmrc thinks somebody's been trying to pull the wool over their eyes. They don't like having the wool pulled over their eyes, even from Devon. Anyway, Amy.
So there was just another question, I mean, actually, there's been a couple of extra questions now. But there was a couple of questions about ICB matters and booms, beneficial owners, officers and managers. If you've got a practice license, you will have booms. Yep. Or you may just have yourself as a beneficial owner and officer. The bookkeeping team asks, I hope that's okay that I've mentioned your name now, but basically if they're the sole director and one of their family members is an employee, but is not a director and has no shares, should they be listed with us? Yes, all employees should be listed with us.
Well, all employees should be listed with us, yes, all freelancers, etc. However, depending on what authority they have, they would not necessarily be listed as a boom. But if it was, say, a son or a daughter, it might well be worth doing it anyway, just to be careful, because that would be seen possibly as a bit of a closed loop. And the fact that they weren't a director was you know, didn't really come into it. They would still have a certain amount of influence on proceedings. But if there's somebody that's pretty young and you're just trying to build them into the business, then I think that would be fine. Give us a call on that one and give us a bit more detail. I think that's probably the best thing to say.
Yes, there was another question from Darren. Does it also apply to company secretaries? And meaning, do you have to notify ICB and do a DBS check?
Yes. Because the company secretary has got quite an important position within the company, not necessarily as a bookkeeper within the company, but certainly as an officer. And the secretary is classed as an officer because of the fiduciary duties that they have to honour. That's a company secretary. I'll just clarify that. Yeah. So if you've got a secretary who's typing your letters for you, Darren, that is different to if you have a company secretary who looks after things like filing your annual returns and that sort of stuff.
Loads of questions about all sorts of stuff. The Inspire Tour, if you just go on the event listing page of the website, which is our website address /events, I think it's the bottom, the last event that's listed, because there's so many virtual branch meetings happening, but the Inspire Tour is there, so you can book tickets for that. And somebody's just checked about whether CPD points for ICB TV are structured or unstructured. I've been saying that they're unstructured because they're not, it's not actual targeted learning, and there's no sort of test or anything like that at the end of it.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've been putting them down as unstructured points.
Yeah, and obviously we don't know whether you've all gone and made a cup of tea instead of listening and just kept things rolling or anything like that. However, we are working on a series of webinars that will be structured learning, because at the end of that we will be doing a questionnaire test, and you'll be expected to pass that to prove that you've been listening properly. That will probably come after the Inspire Tour now. We've got a series of those, everything from starting your business and running it to, I don't know, processes and procedures, etc., etc. Along the lines of what we do in Inspire, but more on an ongoing basis. And it will come under this banner, which we are working on giving it a better name than ICB TV at the moment, because it's technically not television for most of us. But anyway. Amy.
Unfortunately, Samantha says that she did ring ICB and we said they were structured. So it seems like maybe ICB team needs some more structured CPD themselves. With CPD, there is an element of, you do have to kind of assess what your CPD needs are and how valuable you think content is to you, and your achievement of those goals. So I personally would say don't lose sleep over trying to calculate the ins and outs of it. As long as it feels right to you, stick it down. As long as you can justify it.
Perhaps we should have 100 questions on furloughing and see how far people get. Then, if they answer that, they could turn this into structured. That's a good thought.
Yes, you will get structured points on the Inspire Tour, because we are going to have quizzes, and that's a little bit more. It's sort of less of a conversation. It's more structured, basically.
Yeah. Okay. How are we doing? Because actually we're it's gone half past 4 now. So we're going on and on and on. And the thing is, as people are joining, they're asking another question. This could become a marathon if we're not careful. So
yeah. I think, we are getting sort of, bits and bobs of questions. And I think, if anyone's got any more specifically sort of payroll questions, how to deal with things in the accounts, I would say if you could please
bring that up tomorrow
at 3.
Yeah, and we'll launch Claire off much earlier tomorrow, so she will answer more questions, because rather than her make a presentation or us have a chat about her life history and all the rest of it, which she's not a member of ours, so I don't think is as interesting perhaps as the life of Caryl Gibson. And I must just, anyway, so, okay. I think we ought to draw it to a close, because I see we've got a lot of you still with us, but I think we have to stop somewhere along here. So if we call it a close now, it is 25 to. Caryl, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been really good to have you here. It's always wonderful to hear from the chalk face, as it were, what's going on out there, and also find out how people got into bookkeeping, because we've got such wonderful stories. So good luck with your meeting this evening.
Thank you very much. And can I just say to everybody, you know, make sure you all look after yourselves. At the end of this week, it's Easter. If things were normal, we'd all be having a nice bank holiday long weekend. So there is absolutely no reason why we shouldn't do the same now. And just on a slightly more interesting note, I don't know if anybody realises or looks at the night sky, but tomorrow is what's called a pink moon, which is when the moon, it's a spring moon, and the moon is at its closest point to the earth. So it will be very large in the sky. So at some point when it gets dark, step outside the door, just look up and just marvel at what goes on above us, because this will all disappear one day. We'll all see, and you know, we'll all come through it. As long as we look after ourselves. The temptation is there to be there 24/7 for our clients, and sometimes you just have to take the opportunity to step back, turn the phone off, and take time for yourself.
Well, thank you for that. That's great, and it was good to hear from you. Yeah, just to echo what Caryl said, really, please look after yourself. And I know it's very tempting to go out on this gorgeous weather, but please remember that you know, you can either catch this yourself, or you know, put your viruses out, and we have to be really, really careful, because we could potentially lose, well, tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people in this, and we really don't want that to happen, obviously. So yeah, let's all work to get through this. June and I have been in hiding for the last 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks or something like that, mainly because I got pneumonia last year, so I'm supposed to be susceptible to these things, and it's getting a bit odd at times. You know, it'd be nice to go out and have a nice meal somewhere, which we can't do, and it would be nice to go out for a walk and nip up through Hyde Park and go and feed the ducks or something or other, but we're going to avoid doing that, however nice the weather gets. So I would implore you all to be very, very careful. You're very important to us, all of you, and we want to make sure that we've got you all with us when we all get through this, and we go out there and show that we're not just bookkeepers, we're ICB bookkeepers. Thank you very much. Don't forget tomorrow, Claire Warner. Thank you. Bye.